Hi all, how you doing? So last week we heard a bit about how the adaptive child from Eric Berne's philosophy of transactional analysis helps us to cover up and hide the woundedness that we might feel when things happen when we're little kids, and then on into as we're adults. And we heard about some of the behaviours that we actually adapt to use in order to do that. So I did add throughout the week, I added the ones that came to me that during live workshops face to face that people had said were issues for them, the behaviours that had come up. And what we used to do in those live workshops was just sit for a moment thinking about, before the age of 10, if you can remember your childhood, some of the behaviours that you went into as a child to try and hide the fact that you felt the feelings that you felt, which were usually fear or anger. But it's in childhood itself. So really before we start that age of moving into our teens, puberty. That's the word I was trying to think of. So before puberty, when feelings happen, and they overwhelm usually our ability to cope, because we are only children, and children are not as easily able to cope with the huge amount of energy that we are as what adults can. And so children use coping mechanisms such as lying, cheating, stealing, and the things, and maybe even perfectionism or people pleasing, being a goody-goody, which is one of the things I did, intellectualizing, and the things that were in last week's video. So in that, once we hit puberty, we usually then start to move into a more adult space, but we keep the adaptive part of us, and we actually unconsciously use those coping mechanisms to still not have to feel those feelings, because by now I've gone, no, you know what? It worked last time that I didn't feel them, and so I'm just going to use that again. The brain does that without any conscious thought from us. And although we may remember times from that period where we consciously remember saying, I'm just going to do this, it still comes from an unconscious place in us, the impulse to do it, because of it worked before. And so really what we've done is, each time that we've used some kind of coping mechanism to adapt to not feeling the energy of our emotion, then we are really solidifying or making solid the neural pathway in our mind that we need to create to make something permanent in the brain. And so basically our brain, when we do something new, our brain wires and fires, and it says, oh my gosh, they're doing something different. I'm going to have to create a new neural pathway to be able to hold the information on how to do this. And it goes into like a tantrum, and it goes, oh my God, what are you doing? Will you please leave things the way that they are, and don't change anything, because I've got a lot to do. But we've now made this change, so it has to follow our direction and make a new neural pathway. Now, if we never do that thing again, it will just let that neural pathway go. It'll just dissolve back into the further recesses of our brain and be gone pretty much forever. But if we do that same thing again, even not perfectly the same, but very similarly, then our brain will say, oh, you've done it again. And it will lay over the top of that same neural pathway to set it down more firmly. And so then this is where, when that old saying, practice makes perfect, this is where it comes in, because each time that we repeat something, that function of the brain is to lay down over the top of that particular pathway again and again and again and again, each time we repeat it, until it's set solid like stone. And so each time, say we feel afraid, and we go into the behaviour like I did of dissociation. It's like, oh, I feel afraid, can't handle it, it's too much for my brain. So my brain goes, just get out of here, and I float off into a fantasy world. As a kid, that was really helpful to me. And escaping into books. But each time then that I felt afraid, because it worked, my unconscious brain went, I'll just do that again. Or if I tried something new, go, no, that doesn't work, just dissociate. But because I grew up in less than ideal circumstances where I was actually afraid all the time, for various reasons that I'm not going to go into today, that then meant that I had this really solid pathway. Every time you feel fear, just switch off and don't be fully present. Now, most children actually have that particular coping mechanism to some extent. So it might be that you zone out when someone's talking to you. That's dissociation. You might find even these days that you walk in the house after work or after school, and you put your keys down on the hall table, go through into the kitchen and go, oh crap, where'd I put the keys? You can't quite remember putting them down. And that's a form of dissociation. It's like I wasn't fully present in this moment with every part of me being present. Another one that's quite popular among people to understand it is driving to the shops or driving the kids to school, and you don't actually remember the trip because you were thinking about what you were going to cook for dinner tonight, at 8:30 in the morning when you're dropping the kids off. That's a form of dissociation. It's like I'm not fully present driving the car because my thoughts are somewhere else. You might also find, and I do myself, or I don't as much anymore because of the work I've done, but you might find that your thoughts, your feelings, and your actions are all different. So let's say that you've got a job interview. You're feeling terrified. Your thoughts are angry, but your actions are really meek. And so, it's even possible. I've had moments in my past before I learned how to actually resolve these things in myself and deal with my energy, where I would be really, really angry at somebody, and my thoughts were really angry, but I was feeling completely numb, and I was acting as if that person was my best friend. And the reality is that for most people, when we're doing that, they can actually pick up on our energy more than they can pick up on our actions, thoughts, and feelings. And that's when it gets tricky. So if we can start to understand with this adaptive child why we go into those behaviours, those thoughts, those feelings, we then also start, once we've worked ourselves out, then we actually start to see where other people are coming from too. Because let's remember, I'm not the only one that's thinking, feeling, behaving this way. There's millions of people on the planet, billions actually, the people on the planet, and we're all doing that in some way at some point in time. So there are many people who have been able to resolve this stuff for themselves growing up, and they may not do that anymore as a general rule, but there'll still be moments because we are all human, and it's the way that our brains are designed. There are ways that we can learn to resolve it and do what I call improve our response ability. And I tell myself now, my only responsibility is to improve or observe my response ability. Because the thing is, it's the way that our brains are designed is when we go into fear, we go into action. But whatever worked the first time, I know, Joe, and I'm so sorry. I do hope that you're really nurturing yourself And we're very aware it's a really hard time for you. And I'm really grateful that you've showed up. Thanks. So even in that, working through grief, there are some people who say that there's no process for working through grief, but I don't agree with that, because grief is one of those things that shows us how to accept ourselves as we are. And Jo's a really great example of that, because she's learning too. It's, you know what, this grief is so raw and so painful, and it's all that I can be right now is to have this grief. And that is what I've had to learn to do with grief as well. Not fight it, not push it down. And it's one of those things that, that's the wounded child. A wounded child feels the grief. And it makes it a lot better if we can parent ourselves through it by saying, right now I need to feel it and I need to share it occasionally. It would be the adaptive child that would say, oh, just push it down and don't let anybody know, and, keep a stiff upper lip and don't eat dirty laundry in public type of thing, because that adaptive child needs to try and hide that because it thinks that it's saving, and as we discussed last week, it would be rescuing. So thanks for the reminder, Jo. So when we go into that fight or flight or freeze, the first time it's an action. But after that, if the brain unconsciously goes, well, I'll just do the same action again, then it's actually a reaction. So you're breaking the word down, reaction. When we can get to that place in ourselves where we can feel the emotion moving within us, but we don't react to it, we observe it and can respond without a place of reaction, then we've increased our responsibility. And so that's one of the things, it took me quite a while to learn it, but just noticing, not trying to do anything with it, just sitting with whatever it was. And this I call reparenting myself. And we're only going to do probably around 6 videos for this particular series of reparenting. And we are going to talk during it about how we can reparent and where that comes from within us. So I won't get into it today. But going into this adaptive child, the main thing I learned was that if I spend time as my wonder child self, even if it's just 5 minutes here and there to start with, remember that changing the brain, then, I could say, you know what, I'm just going to do 5 minutes right now, and I might not remember for another month, but that 5 minutes that I spend in my wonder child, feeling joy, spontaneity, happiness, if I can, wonder, awe, connection, whatever it is that makes me feel wonderful in some way. And for me at the moment, that is still holding my baby doll, my inner child baby doll, because feeling that beautiful hug from myself and knowing that I love me enough to pick up my baby self and hug me makes me feel wonderful, nurtured, nourished, loved, fulfilled. And so I just do that as often as it comes to me. And doing that helps the adaptive child goes, oh, well, for this 5 minutes, I don't have to do anything. I can be the wonder child too. I'll just merge into that. And then the wounded child says, well, I was feeling afraid or angry or hurt or sad, but right now I can just stop for a minute and merge into the wonder child too, and I'll feel some of that. And so each time we do it, we're stopping the cycle. And we're not saying shut it down and don't feel it. We're saying, guess what? How about we just put it away for 5 minutes? When we're finished, you can feel it again. You can behave that way again. But just for 5 minutes, let's call a truce. Let's just spend 5 minutes feeling wonderful. And like I said at the start, each time we do that, we create a new neural pathway in our own brain to do that. And so what that does is later on, if things happen and the wounded child goes into fear, instead of the adaptive child kicking straight in with some behaviour that we learned in our childhood works, it's been learning something new and positive with our 5-minute practice. So it's more likely to start using that and say, oh, you're afraid. How about we just stop and hug ourselves for a minute? Because the adaptive child can adapt positively as well. And so each time that we practice a positive adaptation, we're also laying neural pathway for that. And that then puts the changes within our control. While they're in our unconscious, they're sort of outside our control. They're outside of our conscious control. If we choose to bring them into our conscious control and start making a change and then repeating the change, then we've chosen positivity and we've put ourselves on that path, which is also more empowering than choosing to keep ourselves on the old path because we don't, because we feel afraid when we make a change. So have any of you had any benefit, or have you tried using something, just do one thing different and it's really been helpful to you as far as changing your own behaviours? Not sure if anyone wants to comment. If you don't, that's fine. I've got a million examples of my own that I can use. Anyone? Fair enough. So I'm actually going to leave it there for tonight because we don't want to make these too long. But like I said, we're going to do about 6 of these and just start to explore. Thanks, Sam Rachel. So what would you like to share about the change you've made around talking to strangers and how you've noticed the changes in your brain? Yeah, Joe, that's a good one. I'm finding it helpful to just be aware of my thoughts too and not try and make anything out of it, just being aware of it. Is there anything else you wanted to say on that, Sam? It's interesting doing it on this platform because I can't see if anyone's typing anything. Yeah. Yes, I find I'm more open to everybody too. Very interesting how it works. I do apologise, by the way, for my glasses. I thought after last week it might be better if I wore glasses so I could see what you were all typing, but I do realise there's a bit of a weird glare there. But we'll work with it. Okay, so what I really encourage you to do is, we'll be doing another one of these next Thursday at 7 o'clock, Australian Eastern Standard Time. And so, oh, good, Joe, I'm so glad you're being gentler with yourself. I'm really practicing that one. It's working a treat. And I'm also noticing how much I'm not still gentle with myself. So it's very interesting. It's almost like the more gentle that we get, the more we notice where we're not being gentle. And it used to annoy me, but because I'm much gentler now, it doesn't annoy me. Yeah, so next Thursday at 7 p.m. Melbourne time. And I just encourage you to really notice, if you have to, have a look at week 1 at some of the examples that are there, just noticing your own behaviours and just considering in the next week, even just once during the whole week, that you spend 5 minutes in your wonder child. So you might want to watch earlier part of this video to see some of the things for that, the spontaneity and the fun. And just think about, you know, if you were a little child who was really okay and not a care in the world, what that might be like. If you start to find that old stuff comes up, just be aware of it and be gentle with yourself about it. I find now that if I'm just aware and say, you know what, it's okay, I'll just put my hand on my heart and say, it's okay, little one. We're just going to think about this. We're not going to go into it. We're just going to think about it for now. If you find that you need to go into it later, you can do that later. But in that space, all you're thinking about is, I wonder what that feels like to be joyful, happy, loved, loving, or whatever it is for your wonder child. What does it feel like to be a wonder child? What would I be thinking like? And just sit in that for 5 minutes and say afterwards, well, now the 5 minutes is up. I can go and do what I need to. I can spend time and be in the wounded child if I want. But I'm just going to make that one change for 5 minutes. And then if you want to do it every day or do it, you know, twice for the week, whatever works for you, I'm just encouraging you to do it once to see what happens for you. I've found that it changes my energy doing it, and it helped me to start observing what it feels like when my energy changes in a non-threatening way. So I'll leave it for there now because it's not a good idea to have these too long. Do remember that I do offer online support sessions if anybody needs them, whether it's you or your friends. They are by heartfelt donation, so there's no actual set price on them because I know firsthand that a lot of people can't really afford to pay for things like that all the time. And oh, that's quite okay, Shirley. This is live, but you can go back and watch it later on. You might have found that out last week, so don't worry too much, and I hope you get it going soon. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. I hope you got something out of it. And if you find that you're not getting something out of it, or you think you've got some constructive feedback, shoot me a private message and let me know, because I am open to it. And I'd like to make sure that these are provided for you. They're not just so that I can be famous or something on Facebook. Thanks so much. Much love. Bye. See you 7 o'clock next Thursday. Bye.